Welcome back, Defenders. Today there's a lot of bad news for Russia, and we're going to start here. Russian army general killed in a Moscow car explosion. This was the deputy head of the main intelligence directive of the general staff, Major General Yaroslav Moskalik. And he was killed by a car bomb in Moscow. There is a picture of the body. If you want to see it, I'll link it down below. And there's also a video. Ukraine's intelligence had been surveilling this general. They knew where and when he was going to be, and they planted a car bomb on some random car. They waited for the general to come out of this building. They were watching, and they detonated it. This is to send a message. Ukraine is sending a message to all of Russia's ruling elite and top generals. 3 years into this war, Putin still cannot secure his capital. Putin cannot protect you. Anywhere you go where there are parked cars, you're now at risk. So let's update my favorite Wikipedia page, list of Russian generals killed during the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and officially it's up to 21 Russian generals and admirals confirmed killed in this war. If you guys remember Igor Kirillov, he was killed in December by an IED placed on an electric scooter. And this is Yaroslav Moskalik, killed April 25th, a car bomb in Moscow. He won't be the last. Additionally, a Russian electronic warfare systems designer was also killed by a car bomb, but in the city of Bryansk. And this happened more than a week ago on April 17th, but we just got the confirmation today, and he was a weapons designer. And Ukraine successfully got him. And since we're talking about Russian generals, military court jails ex-general Ivan Popov for 5 years because of fraud. This is a Russian general who was in charge of the 58th Combined Arms Army, and he was very popular. He was a competent, popular commander with his soldiers who made the mistake of being critical of Gerasimov and Putin and the orders he was being given. So Putin made an example of him. He was arrested in May of last year and then sentenced to corruption, but every Russian general engages in corruption. Anytime you see a conviction in a Russian court, it's for political reasons. Putin wanted to make an example of this guy. Let's follow up on that arsenal. Poof. Looks like Ukraine erased 300,000 tons of Russian ammunition. Frontline reports Ukraine just blew up a year's worth of Russian ammo, 6 million shells. This was the 51st Arsenal in the Vladimir Oblast. This is northeast of Moscow. And I'm still not convinced this was Ukraine. Like, it makes sense, but there were no drones or missiles spotted in the area. So if Ukraine did do this, this was partisans. This was men on the inside in the arsenal choosing to sabotage it. I imagine it's not difficult to convince Russian soldiers if you want this war to end, then Putin needs to run out of ammunition. So the satellite images are showing which buildings were completely obliterated, which were damaged, and then obviously there's still buildings intact, but this was a lot of explosions, and this was a huge loss for the Russian military. Crimea will stay with Russia. This is what Trump told Time magazine. The big story of last week was the United States giving their final offer to Ukraine. Marco Rubio said, if Ukraine doesn't accept this, then maybe we'll walk away. J.D. Vance said, if Ukraine doesn't accept this, then maybe the United States will walk away from the peace talks or the peace efforts. Here's a summary of what the United States peace plan is. Russia basically gets to keep all the land they've taken. The United States will officially recognize Crimea as belonging to Russia. Ukraine is forever barred from joining NATO, and all sanctions placed on Russia will be lifted without conditions. This was America's peace proposal they were trying to force on Ukraine. They were telling Ukraine, this is what you have to offer to the Russians for something. A ceasefire or a peace deal, even though we know Russia's not interested. So the Russians are ecstatic. As of 3 days ago, they were getting absolutely everything they wanted from Donald Trump. Here's the latest clip from Russian Media Monitor. Olga is delighted with Trump's peace proposal. This is what they're saying on Kremlin State TV. Who could have imagined this? No one ever. They can't even believe it now. If you're talking about Donald Trump, it's shocking, it really is. I met not only Donald Trump, but him as well. Completely incredible. All smiles and laughter from Olga. Talking about Donald Trump, no one could have imagined we would live to see the day when the correct answer about whom Crimea belongs to would come from the President of the United States, and he would not only give it, but will also teach the President of Ukraine what the correct answer is. If today there was a situation where the Europeans would have to agree with Trump's proposal to recognize Crimea as Russian, the whole construct of anti-Russian policies would fall apart. It was built up since 2014 because of the situation in Crimea, became the starting point in the war of sanctions and the confrontation with Russia. President Obama came out and said that Russia ended up on the wrong side of history. This is when the hand wheel of sanctions started up. We have reached the final point of the conflict. This is the Russians taking a victory lap that Donald Trump is just doing everything they want. These ideas, these proposals are coming from Vladimir Putin, given to Steve Witkoff, and then Donald Trump just repeats them. That was 3 days ago, 4 days ago. And we've got Ukraine and Europe's response. Negotiating with war criminal Putin is futile. European officials call on Trump to stop appeasing the aggressor. Parliamentary leaders cite mistakes of Munich in 1938 in their appeal against territorial concessions. This is the joint statement put out by the chairs of foreign affairs committees. We, the chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee of European Parliaments, call upon President Trump and the U.S. Congress to demonstrate true leadership in confronting the global threat posed by Russia as an aggressor state. We urge an end to the policy of appeasement and call instead for a united, resolute stance against Russia's terrorist regime. We strongly warn against yielding to its blackmail and deception. Strong leadership is also needed across European countries, along with reinforced transatlantic solidarity. We call upon the United States and other NATO members to admit Ukraine into NATO without delay. We urge the EU member states to accelerate Ukraine's accession to the European Union. We must not repeat the mistakes of Munich in 1938. Europe offered a counter-proposal. We got Donald Trump's final offer. If nobody accepts it, Donald Trump or his proxies said he would walk away. And here is Europe's counter-proposal. Commit to a full and unconditional ceasefire in the sky, land, and sea. Both sides immediately enter into negotiations with the United States and European countries invited. Ceasefire monitoring led by the United States and supported by third countries. Russia must unconditionally return all deported Ukrainian children, exchange prisoners of war, all for all, release civilian prisoners. The list goes on, but nobody in Europe changed any of their messaging. Everything that Ukraine and the European Union has been saying has to happen. They just ignored what Donald Trump said. Donald Trump said, "This is my final offer, I'm walking away," and nobody in Europe blinked. Nobody in Ukraine blinked. Nobody is taking Donald Trump's proposal seriously. And here's President Macron. He's pretty fed up. You can feel the emotion from his voice, so I'm going to play this clip. I'm not going to read the subtitles. You're going to have to listen to some French, but I appreciate what the President of France is saying. It was March 11th. On March 11th, a month and a half ago, Ukraine offered Russia an unconditional ceasefire. That is what Donald Trump was pressuring Ukraine to do in early March, and Zelensky agreed. And for a month and a half, the Russians have been completely ignoring this unconditional ceasefire that's been offered. You and I know the truth. The reason why Russia ignores it is Russia doesn't actually want peace. But Zelensky can now use this. Zelensky can now say, I am not going to discuss the occupied territories or who gets what until Russia agrees to a ceasefire. Here is what Zelensky is saying, and I think he's going to keep repeating himself. I think this is a winning strategy. Russia has no counter to it. Here is what President Zelensky says. On the proposal of the United States, once again, we're grateful for the proposals from all of our partners, both the United States and the Europeans. We respond that a complete, unconditional ceasefire opens up opportunities to talk about everything, and we are ready for dialogue in any, I emphasize once again, any formats with anyone in this format at any time, but only after a real signal that Russia is ready to end the war. Such a signal would be a complete, unconditional ceasefire. Why is Putin not agreeing to an unconditional ceasefire to engage in peace talks? He can always start the war up again if peace talks fail. But I'm convinced that Putin has made the decision he can't stop the fighting on the front lines. He can't agree to anything to make it stop. And my personal theory is there would be a mutiny in the Russian ranks. If the meat assaults stopped, if the shelling stopped, the FPV stopped, and you now have Russian soldiers basically sitting idle while there's peace talks. If Putin then said, peace talks failed, go back to meat assaults on the front lines, go back to dying, I think Putin is genuinely concerned there would be a revolt in his own ranks. So Putin has made the calculation that the risk is too high. He has to keep his war machine going every single day. Russian soldiers have to keep dying every single day without interruption. Otherwise, he might not be able to convince them to keep dying. Trump's also still demanding the mineral deal. Trump demands Ukraine sign his mineral deal immediately. He put out a tweet, but Ukraine is just ignoring him. No signing of Trump's mineral deal expected this week, according to Ukraine's finance minister. Zelensky is stalling. Zelensky is not going to sign this mineral deal when Ukraine gets nothing. Donald Trump is not even willing to sell defensive Patriot air defense systems to Ukraine for $15 billion. So Ukraine is already prepared. This is according to Bild. Ukraine is prepared for the worst-case scenario, that the United States will end all support, all intelligence sharing, all cooperation, training, whatever. Ukraine doesn't want this to happen, but Ukraine is actually showing strength by not bowing down to what Trump and J.D. Vance want. And this is a problem for Trump because his approval rating continues to go down. I know once a week I show you this chart, but this is very important to get Donald Trump to change positions on many issues. So his approval rating is now at 44.2, disapproval 52.2. He has lost 5.6% in a month, and he's lost nearly 20% support since he was inaugurated. And he is freaking out. Donald Trump is very self-conscious about this, and I think Donald Trump's worst fear is he goes to a public event and then everyone boos him. But we got our first 30 approval rating in the 30s. So VoteHub is an aggregate. You can see there's like Bollinger Bands showing the range of polls that come in. These are the averages. And we got our first approval rating in the 30s. This was an AP poll done this week. Fox News had him at 44. You can kind of average it out, but he is sinking fast every single day. Only about half of Republicans say Trump has focused on the right priorities. This was uncovered in the AP poll, and only half of Republicans, only half of MAGA are happy with what Donald Trump is doing. He's polling at 9% amongst independents and 7% amongst Democrats. And part of this is Russia and Ukraine. Support for Ukraine, opposition to Russia, is a popular winning issue here in the United States. And Donald Trump is destroying his reputation by this nonsense talk about recognizing Crimea as belonging to Russia. So if Ukraine just says no, if Ukraine walks away from Donald Trump, if he makes unreasonable demands, Trump can't ignore Ukraine. Trump can't just ignore the largest land war in Europe since World War II. This is what J.D. Vance wants. This is what Elon Musk wants. This is what RFK Jr. wants. But Donald Trump is the boss. He's the guy in charge. He's the one that everyone is going to blame if things get worse. So here's the plot twist that occurred in the last 3 days. Trump calls Russian ballistic missile strike on Kyiv bad timing as death toll reaches 12 civilians. At the exact same time Donald Trump was trying to force on Ukraine a bad peace deal, Putin screwed up and he bombed the capital city of Kyiv with North Korean ballistic missiles, and he killed a bunch of civilians. You saw this tweet in my last video. I am not happy with Russian strikes on Kyiv. Not necessary and very bad timing. Vladimir, stop! This is a horrible tweet because when is a good time to bomb civilians in the capital city of Kyiv? So we had an opportunity. Donald Trump and Zelensky hadn't seen each other or talked since the disastrous White House meeting, but they met up in Rome for Pope Francis's funeral. White House calls Trump-Zelensky meeting in Rome very productive. And the Vatican broke protocol by allowing Zelensky to appear in the front row. So Donald Trump appeared here, and then front row, here's President Zelensky for the funeral procession. And I think according to seating, it's alphabetical by country or something, so Zelensky wasn't supposed to sit there, but the Vatican wanted to help. And this is the moment that Zelensky entered the cathedral, and he was the only world leader to receive an applause when he entered. Not a lot of Russia's allies were present at the funeral. And these photographs, these are iconic. These are instantly memorable moments, and I think when biographies are written about these men, some of these photographs might appear. So initially, the Vatican was going to set up 3 chairs. This is in St. Peter's Basilica. And Macron was supposed to join them, but Donald Trump waved them away. Donald Trump said, No, I'd like to speak to Zelensky alone, one-on-one. There's no translators. Zelensky has to hold his own and speak entirely in English. And this photograph, guys, this is the painting of Jesus with John the Baptist inside St. Peter's Basilica with Donald Trump and Zelensky speaking to each other for about 15 minutes. Here's what President Zelensky said about this meeting in the Vatican. It was a good meeting. We discussed a lot one-on-one, hoping for results on everything we covered, protecting lives of our people, full and unconditional ceasefire, reliable and lasting peace that will prevent another war from breaking out. Very symbolic meeting that has potential to become historic if we achieve joint results. Immediately after this meeting, Donald Trump put out a tweet saying, maybe Putin doesn't want to stop the war. After meeting Zelensky and some Western leaders supporting Ukraine in Rome, Trump shows new signs of uncertainty concerning Putin and his intentions. We got another stupid tweets in which most of it is Trump complaining about Obama. But at the end, he does say, with all of that being said, there was no reason for Putin to be shooting missiles into civilian areas, cities and towns over the last few days. It makes me think that maybe he doesn't want to stop the war, and he's just tapping me along. Is Donald Trump the world's greatest detective? Did he just figure it out, that Putin doesn't actually want to stop this war? And the Russians have future plans for many more wars to come. Trump moves from saying Vladimir to Putin after the Vatican meeting. So in his original tweets, he used Putin's first name, indicating a friendship. And then in this tweet, he uses his last name to distance himself. It's stupid. All of it is incredibly stupid, but that is everything about Donald Trump. And I don't believe it. I don't believe that this Vatican meeting changed his mind. It helped, but I don't think we're there yet. Steve Witkoff is a complete Russian agent. Donald Trump is surrounded by people who love Russia. His kids, Don Jr. and Elon Musk, Tulsi Gabbard, Kash Patel. All of these people love Russia and hate Ukraine. And this is who Donald Trump speaks to and hangs out with most days. So Trump, there is a chance. There is a chance he's going to flip on Russia and go nuts. But I think his approval rating has to go lower. I think his approval rating firmly has to be in the 30s, and he'll get desperate to do something that's popular. Tariffs are not popular. Sending people to a gulag in El Salvador without due process is not popular. But if Trump just says we're going to put sanctions on Russia and we're going to sell weapons to Ukraine, that's all it would take. Donald Trump can walk away from this entire war and focus on other things if he just increases sanctions on Russia and agrees to sell weapons to the Ukrainians. That's all he has to do to have a win on a popular issue with the American people. He could get there, but I think Steve Witkoff would be very disappointed, and Putin as well would be disappointed, and I think Putin and Trump's friendship would officially be over at that point. Here are some other headlines. Russia announces the complete liberation of Kursk and then thanks the North Koreans. The Russians are so dumb, they can't even keep their propaganda straight. For the last 6 months, they've been lying, saying that North Korean soldiers are not helping them on the battlefield. North Korean soldiers are not fighting Ukrainians in Europe. They're claiming that anytime you see an Asian-looking man in a Russian uniform, that is an ethnic, person from the Far East, but Gerasimov screwed up, and he admitted the truth. I would like to especially highlight the participation of the servicemen of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea in the liberation of the border areas of the Kursk region, in accordance with the Treaty on Comprehensive Strategic Partnership between our countries. They provided significant assistance in defeating the armed forces of Ukraine that had broken through. The soldiers and officers of the Korean People's Army, carrying out combat missions side by side with Russian servicemen, demonstrated high professionalism, resilience, courage, and heroism during the defense against the Ukrainian incursion. He wasn't supposed to say that. We are lucky they're the stupid guys. We are lucky that Gerasimov is incompetent and Putin doesn't fire him. He just keeps him in that position because he's loyal. In a dictatorship, it's okay to be incompetent, as long as you remain loyal to the dictator. Other bad news for Russia: pro-Ukrainian resistance agents disable communications for Russian military battalion and aviation plant in Russia's Dagestan. Ukrainian partisans sabotage a railway used by Russian forces in Luhansk. The resistance continues. This war has been going on for over 3 years, and Russia still cannot find all the partisans and eliminate them, both in Russia and the occupied territories. Ukraine's intelligence, their agents are everywhere, committing acts of sabotage, as well as acts of resistance. This is funny. Secret Russian satellite linked to nuclear weapon program seems to have malfunctioned. This is Russia's Cosmos 2553, and it was linked to their nuclear weapons program. The theory is that Russia was trying to deploy this in space to use nuclear weapons to destroy American satellites, but satellites stopped working. It's now non-responsive. This is a weird story. Son of senior CIA official died fighting for Russian forces in Ukraine. A young American who called himself an anti-fascist and criticized the U.S. military-industrial complex died fighting for Russia. This guy was a leftist. The weird thing about Kremlin propaganda is you see what you want to see. Russia puts out so much of everything that it's like a buffet. You can pick and choose what you want to believe about Russia. So Russia has attracted to their military both hard-right fascists and hard-left communists. So this was the son of the deputy director of the CIA. I'm guessing they're from Illinois or Chicago. And he died on the front lines. This was an American citizen, the privileged son of a high-ranking U.S. official, and the Russians still used him as meat to just charge through an open field and get killed by artillery, landmines, or FPV drones. And now he's gone. Ukraine says it's received 84,000 missing person requests from families of Russian soldiers. The families of 84,000 missing Russian soldiers have filed inquiries with Ukraine to learn what happened to their loved ones, because the Russian government doesn't know and doesn't care. The Russian government doesn't care when their soldiers die. Final video I have for you is of President Zelensky visiting the apartment complex that the Russians bombed in Kyiv last week, killing 12 people, including a child. Here's the video of Zelensky showing his last respects.
Хочу подякувати вам, міжнародним організаціям, дипмісіям, шановним послам. Знаю, тут є представники Міністерства закордонних справ наших дружніх країн, наших партнерів. Ваша присутність тут – це велика повага до українського народу, до цієї боротьби за життя.
Загинуло в епіцентрі вибуху 12 чоловік. Із них одна дитина, загинула одна сім'я, батько, мати та 17-річний хлопець. В сім'ї залишилась тільки одна 14-річна дівчина, яка знаходиться зараз в лікарні. Поранено 87 осіб, із них 10 дітей і 25 літніх осіб. Ми витягнули з-під завалів одного чоловіка, який близько 8 годин знаходився в важкому стані в цьому будинку.
Continue supporting Ukraine. Russia will be defeated. That's all for this update video. Glory to Ukraine, glory to the heroes. If you found this video informative, give me a thumbs up. Best way to support the channel. Comments and questions, let me know down below. I love hearing from you guys. Till the next video, keep defending the truth, keep defending democracy.